I'm Dave Strohmaier. I am chairman of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. I'm also chairman of the Missoula Board of County Commissioners, and on behalf of Missoula County, welcome to the Missoula Public Library and the 2024 annual conference of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. We are delighted that you have all taken a little bit of your time to share with us today on this lovely June 7th day in Missoula, Montana. It's very lovely outside of these pulled shades over here. You can guarantee that, and hopefully it breaks. You can have a chance to check out the library, take a scan of this beautiful valley and a beautiful day, which was not so beautiful about a week ago. So we're delighted with the weather. For all of you who've joined us from all over the United States, not just here in the state of Montana. We have a big day ahead of us. We are going to be sailing through this agenda. We have a lot to pack in. This is going to be at a pretty lively clip today, which hopefully will help folks stay awake and stay engaged. A lot of the conversation that we hope will happen will not necessarily just happen in this room, but will happen between breaks, following this conference, because what we want to do is to be able to cross-pollinate ideas and bring to bear on the question of expansion of passenger rail service, extreme creativity. Today, I want to start off by some level setting in terms of the place that we are in. I want to acknowledge that we are today in the Aboriginal lands of the Salish and Kalispel people. For those of you who have already registered for tonight's banquet, and I'm sorry we are totally sold out, but it's going to be a great event if you are coming. This will be at the Payne Native American Center on the University of Montana campus. U.S. Department of Transportation Assistant Secretary Orlando Teller will be our keynote for that event, and the program will be coordinated by the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. Before I hand it over to the mayor of Missoula to make a few introductory remarks and welcome statements, I do want to just spend one moment thinking about gratitude, because so often we sail through life and we don't take time to take stock of the wins, the accomplishments, the things that we share in common as far as blessings of accomplishments as it relates to passenger rail. And I would be remiss not to say some initial thank yous to the folks who put this event on. Our planning committee, the Missoula Public Library, the Residence Inn last night. Did folks have a good time over at the Residence Inn reception? Okay. University of Montana, Associated Students of the University of Montana Transportation, who will be providing transportation tonight from downtown Missoula to the venue. Our board of directors for the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, the many volunteers that have put in countless hours to get us to this point today, and also to the Federal Railroad Administration. This meeting is being held today to capitalize on the fact that there are a lot of folks, a lot of knowledgeable folks and energy in town related to passenger rail. So the hard work that the FRA has done over the course of the last year and a half or 2 years related to the long distance study is something that is not lost on any of us, and we are very grateful and appreciative of that. I also want to recognize that we have in our midst today, and we are very grateful for this, and in the spirit of gratitude, we are thankful that one of Amtrak's board members, Joel Shabbat, is with us. Where are you, Joel? Okay. We are honored to have you here in Missoula, Montana. There will be a lot of other thank yous yet to be had today. And as I mentioned, today is an opportunity to share ideas, to be innovative, to be creative, and to think expansively about passenger rail, not only in the state of Montana, but throughout the entire greater Northwest region and the nation. I think sometimes we think not all that expansively. We come to these big, hairy issues from a place of scarcity, not abundance. We sometimes find ourselves bidding against ourselves and ending up with a much smaller, anemic result than we might otherwise. sometimes what I hear from folks when it comes to passenger rail is reminiscences of their last worst experience riding a train, rather than setting the bar high in terms of what is the service that we and our constituents want in the 21st century, and let us set that bar and then remove any of the obstacles that are in our way to achieving that. In sum, let us embrace today a can-do attitude. Let us think about how we here in the state of Montana even can catalyze something that is going to be meaningful for this entire nation. And so with that, I would like to introduce the mayor of Missoula, Montana. Come on up.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Cool, I wore the same suit jacket that's in my picture. That was well timed. I own more than one, but you know, it's a good go-to. Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Davis. It's nice to see you. Thank you for coming to Missoula for this annual event. I know that some of you were here yesterday. I'm seeing a lot of faces in the audience for folks that participated in the Federal Rail Authority's fourth meeting, and it's incredible that the Big Sky Rail Authority's annual meeting can be held at the same time. Dave, thank you for your incredible welcome. I think that was a really nice way to set the tone for how we want to work together moving forward on a transformative project. You know, obviously this is no small undertaking in which you are all committing your time and energy, and we are focused on something that really can change the way our communities connect to one another and the way that we move around inside our states and our region, and across the United States, quite frankly. I think back a bit about my own connection with trains. I'm from Kalispell, Montana, so Whitefish has Amtrak train service, passenger rail service. And so my uncle lived in British Columbia, and we would often utilize the Amtrak, and it was something that was part of my life here in Montana, even though here in Missoula, Amtrak, of course, stopped existing and stopped working in 1979. And so my family's originally from Long Island, New York, and I'd go back to see my grandparents. And I could fly into New York City and then hop on the Long Island Railroad and head easily out on the LIR. And it was just so easy. It still is to this day. And those kinds of things have informed my, I think, connection to and belief that this is a reality for us, that we're able to do this. My spouse is from Europe, and so I do have the occasion to go over there and see how their communities are connected in ways that train service is just an everyday part of their world. And obviously we live in a very big country and we have our own constraints and our own issues, and yet that shouldn't hold us back from achieving what we want to see happen here. And so anyway, I'm just so thrilled that we have the opportunity to host you here. We have great plans for what will happen here in Missoula once this becomes a reality. Our old train depot, which is downtown, it's owned by the Washington Corporations and Montana Rail Link, and currently it's a beautiful facility. It hosts a museum that Denny Washington has appointed beautiful and amazing elements of the railroad history, and some businesses. We would love to be able to see how we incorporate something like a new train depot or some kind of activated space there. And so we've initiated those conversations. They know we're interested in that. We do a lot of effort in terms of long-range planning and transportation planning here in Missoula County, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so the opportunity for us to connect with long-range and long-distance rail with transportation options within our community is really something that we truly envision. We can connect not only our world-class transit system to this long-range trail, but we can connect other micro-modal opportunities for people to get in and around Missoula without necessarily having to get into single vehicle occupancy. So it's something that we really see as not only a way for us to better connect, we can also meet a lot of our climate goals. We can reduce, our emissions, and we do live in a bowl here in Missoula, and so we're quite conscious of how we can keep our air quality good, especially as we continue to live in a world of climate change and fire and smoke. And so we're really conscientious for how we might be able to get around a little bit easier and reduce the amount of emissions into the air. And this is one way to do that. So I hope you have had the chance to get around Missoula. Take a break today, walk down the river trail. I'll be here for lunch. I'll see you this evening if you are going to be at the Payne, the Payne Family Native American Center on the University of my campus. It's an incredible facility. The trail will take you right there, by the way. So get out and walk around and enjoy yourself. And thank you so much for your commitment to this effort. Thanks for being in Missoula.
All right, thank you, Mayor Davis. And I just realized, I'm mortified, we actually have a typo. We misspelled Amtrak up here, unless Elaine is a nominee for something else. I don't know. So I want to give just a couple minutes for Elaine Clegg to introduce herself as the newest nominee to the Amtrak Board of Directors. Elaine.
Well, thank you. I feel a little bad that Joel's not the one up here because he's actually on the board. I'm only a nominee. There's still a confirmation process to go. But, you know, what an incredible day today to see this group here in Missoula. I'll hark back to a little bit about why we're here as well. After the pandemic hit, some of us got a little antsy and bored. I don't know about all of you. And one of the things I did was call my good friend John Robert Smith and say, you know, we used to have trains in Boise and I want them back, and now seems like a good time to start talking about it. Do you know anyone else in our part of the country who's interested? And he gave me Dave's name. He said, Dave is very interested. He's pulling together a group in Montana. You should talk to him. So we did. We ended up organizing a Zoom meeting and expected, you know, maybe a dozen people to show. 49 people were on that call. And they were from Washington and Oregon and Idaho and Utah and Wyoming and Montana and even into the Dakotas. And we were like, wow, okay, this is a thing. This is a big thing. And from that came the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Working Group. From that came the Big Sky Rail Authority. From that came the pieces of the IIJA that support rail in doing this long-distance study that was conducted here yesterday, and in some of the funding that's now available to restore and revitalize long-distance passenger rail in the United States. And thank you to everyone in the room who's been a part of that. Thank you to Dave. Thank you to all of the other players, the All Aboard Northwest, All Aboard Washington, Rail Passengers Association, lots and lots of folks who've been supporting this effort. Tell you a little tiny story about myself. My mother was born in Minnesota right after the great fires that burned all of the forests in northern Minnesota. Her family was a logging family. They owned a sawmill. The sawmill burned down, and they didn't know what they were going to do with their lives, and they got an opportunity to come to Idaho. They rode the train to Idaho from Minnesota and opened a logging camp in north of Boise, in a little place that now the biggest town is Cascade. It's near McCall, if any of you have ever heard of that. And they lived in a boxcar on a siding for 7 years while they got the logging camp going. So my history has lots and lots to do with trains, because the only way to get to Boise was the train. The only way to visit family anywhere else was the train. And then when I was a kid, we moved to Denver, and my mom and my sisters and I would get on the train and go back to Boise and spend the summer. And it was the most magical trip, always. It was wonderful. And so, you know, I want my kids and my grandkids to be able to utilize this transportation mode that is different. You know, flying is great. I think we all know that sometimes we get to go somewhere we wouldn't get to go because of planes. But rail travel is just a different kind of travel. And so the opportunity to reestablish that and to reestablish at the same time a connectivity in the West that hasn't existed for almost 50 years, I just think is a lifetime opportunity. And thank you all for being here to help us try to grasp it, because I think we're going to. One last thing. Senator Crapo in Idaho has been in the Senate for a very long time at this point, and he's always been trying to reestablish the Pioneer Line in Idaho. So you guys have the North Coast Hiawatha. By the way, both the North Coast and the Pioneer are on the priority list of the long-distance rail study. Yay. So I've been working with Senator Crapo since 1997 on reestablishing rail. In 2008, he and Senator Wyden got a study, but it didn't go anywhere. So, I've been working with him on this effort. About a year ago, I was on a call with him, and he said, I've been working on this the whole time I've been in the Senate, and you've gotten farther in the last 2 years than we've gotten in 2 decades. So thank you, keep going, let's make this happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. And thank you for everyone, not only who is in the room here physically, but we have folks on the line joining us virtually. We will be moderating that feed throughout today's conference. So if folks have questions, we will try to get those addressed if there's time during some of the Q&A and sessions throughout the day. So,
hello, it's Secretary Pete.
Holy smokes! The secretary is joining us. So I'm going to get off the stage. There we go.
Hello, it's Secretary Pete Buttigieg here. Though I can't join you in person today, I do want to thank Chairman Strohmaier and everyone at the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority for this opportunity to share a few words. It was wonderful meeting some of your strongest advocates last month in Missoula, and I know that FRA Deputy Administrator Jennifer Mitchell is there with you now, and you'll have a lot to discuss, so I will keep things brief. For too long, American passenger rail suffered from disinvestment and underinvestment. So many Americans would return to where they came from in the U.S. from a trip abroad and think, why can't we have that? We're changing. Passenger rail is something that the Biden-Harris administration strongly believes in. America, in the past, has committed itself to good passenger rail. We're doing it again, thanks to President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure package. In fact, we are putting the most federal funding into passenger rail since Amtrak was created over 50 years ago. And under President Biden's leadership, we are now in the midst of an infrastructure decade. All over the country, we are building new tunnels, expanding routes, straightening and improving tracks to make train service more efficient and more reliable. Over $28 billion in grants were awarded last year alone, including one to upgrade service along the Empire Builder route between Chicago and the Pacific Northwest. We know there is so much more work ahead of us when it comes to passenger rail. And those of you here today are at the forefront of some of that important work. Work to make sure that more people can benefit from a convenient way of traveling. Work that will help cut down on the traffic on our roads and highways. Work that will connect people to good-paying jobs, to education, to friends, and to loved ones. You know just how much your communities can gain from the restoration of the North Coast Hiawatha line. You spent years advocating for the restoration of this line, and now you are putting pen to paper in new ways to build the plan, the budget, and the timeline that can turn that advocacy into results. For our part, the Biden-Harris administration will continue to invest in passenger rail so that we can expand service to more parts of the country and grow a safer, cleaner, more equitable, and reliable rail system. And as this group knows so well, we're making good progress on the Amtrak Daily Long-Distance Service Study, which is bringing us even closer to restoring previously discontinued lines and creating new ones, too. This is an extraordinary time and marks the beginning of a new era for American rail. Together, we can rise to this moment and bring efficient, reliable, long-distance passenger rail to more communities across the United States.
And next, we will queue up statements from U.S. Senator John Tester and U.S. Senator Steve Daines.
Thank you to the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority for all that you do. Your work will have a lasting impact on working families and local economies across Montana. You folks know better than anyone how critical Montana's railways are to our state. Whether it's by growing our economy, supporting our businesses, or connecting our friends and families, rail service is absolutely essential to rural America. And that is why I've been proud to partner with many of you to improve passenger rail service in Montana. Whether that's by standing up to the Biden administration for nominating 0 folks to the Amtrak board from western states, or whether that's bringing long-term passenger rail back to southern Montana through the North Coast Hiawatha Amtrak route. I'm also proud to have partnered with many of you as I wrote my bipartisan infrastructure bill and fought for robust investments in passenger rail. And those investments are continuing to have lasting impacts as we work to upgrade service on the Empire Builder and explore a much-needed return to the North Coast Hiawatha. Together, I know we're going to get it done and get it done right. So thank you again for what you do, and please know that my door is always open.
Hi, Steve Daines here, and welcome to Missoula. And thanks for inviting me to share a few words at today's Big Sky Passenger Rail Conference. Rail service helps connect Montanans from every corner of our state. It boosts our economy, and it helps visitors experience the beauty of Big Sky country. And in the Senate, I'm working to protect and expand routes while also keeping travel affordable. The future of passenger rail in Montana is bright, and you all will play an important role in shaping it. I really appreciate your work to keep Montana communities connected, and I'm excited for what's ahead. So a big thanks again for all of your work, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
I mean, it's really, really hard to follow these speakers this morning. So, but we're going to just keep this show on the rails and keep it going here. We'll follow up with the state of the BSPRA. A little echo there. My name is Jess Peterson. I serve as your executive director, and you'll see some of our staff. We'll introduce them here as we move along. And again, I just harken back to that Lewistown meeting. Of course, Elaine talks a little bit about those initial meetings and how far we have come. So I want to give everyone a big round of applause for all the work you've done to be here. It's amazing. And we'll click to the next slide, please. So oftentimes when you stand up and you talk about our vision and our mission, you're thinking, wow, isn't that aspirational? Wouldn't it be nice? Look at this vision. Look at this mission. We are truly delivering on that. So as the chairman and I will walk through that, it's been an incredible run. And we're so grateful for each and every one of you that have played a role in that. Next slide, please. Okay, we might need to have a clicker, Maggie. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can I use this one here? Okay, now we're talking. All righty. So the chairman and I will walk through the organizational structure, the mission alignment, and the financial position. We are very fortunate, very grateful for all of our board contributions and involvement, engagement. Why don't you, anyone that's a board member, just stand on up here. We have our member counties, our BNSF, Amtrak, Montana departments. Get up, board members, get up. CSKT, Crow, and Northern Cheyenne tribes. We are so grateful. Each and every one are represented. These folks do it. Thank you all so much. We're grateful. And this board, I got to tell you, this board, it makes working on other boards seem you're just not accomplishing near as much. Maybe we're a little biased, but this board has accomplished a great deal. Our committees, we have a very active committee structure. We're grateful for that committee structure and everything they bring to it. We Western Sky Strategies, we're based in the heart of the rail district in downtown Billings, Montana. And we're very grateful to have an incredible team. Maggie Tupper's helping out there. Kyla's helping out on the volunteer side. Allison just ran back and forth in a Brit. They're in the back, of course. They all moved around right as I came up here. So just get familiar with those folks when you're working the board meetings. It's Maggie. She's doing exactly what she's doing right now, which just such an easy task, right? In person, virtual, attendees from afar, and all the above. So completing all that. We are grateful. Kyla's done a great job of helping out in the initial phases, and now she continues to volunteer and help with us. We're most appreciative. All of our team members, I won't walk through them, but we do have a very diversified team as far as with portfolios and the role they're playing on. We pulled over Allison Corbin from Big Sky Economic Development in Billings to help as we took on some very large grants and agreements and whatnot to manage all those. So we are in a position to have a fully functioning staff along with each one of our board and committee members. Again, looking at that map, it's really, really incredible. The majority of the state of Montana is covered with county-wide participation. And it's of note, and we continue to look at, yes, we notice some of those donuts in there, right? Some of those counties that have not quite understood or stepped up to the plate. However, what's exciting is you go through any one of these towns, any one of these counties, the town and city engagement, it's always hard to say cities in Montana, right? I mean, people come in to hear and say cities in Montana. So our larger towns, right, throughout the rail line, incredible participation. The pint nights, the engagement, our supporters, our folks, they're really helping get involved. So again, we wouldn't be where we're at had we not have such incredible engagement with our counties, with our towns, municipalities. And we'll walk through that a little bit because, yes, as each and every one of you know, you still have to have a budget. You still have to have the cash flow. You still have to have operations. We are grateful for every one of you that have put a dime, literally a dime in the pocket, because as you've heard about, the funds are coming down the line. But we still have to have our base dollars. So just kind of a snapshot, because this is the state of the authority. You do need to know about the financials. We do present them on a regular basis. And thanks, Rich. Thanks for everybody that plays a role in that. So just looking through a few of those pieces, member contributions are a big, big part of that. So you look at this budget. Is this just phenomenal or what? What is being accomplished with this small in numbers? It's almost like a little bit saying, okay, this is what we're working on. And then the numbers are going to get bigger, and Mr. Chairman's going to talk a lot about that. So again, the revenue side, so we're grateful. Dan Bucks. We are so grateful for the dollars that you have brought and you have financed and you've brought in with your committee. We would be nothing without the fundraising that we've been able to pull in. And then looking a little bit of our expenses and whatnot, staffing side, but also just getting our board members here and their involvement, their engagement. Annual meeting, when we put these on, not a lot of dollars come in on that. So trying to be able to kind of balance that out and again, get the work that needs to be done. Since we last met, so you look at that, about $100,000 operating budget on the internal side, on the functioning side. Then you look at what we're bringing in because of our partners, and they're here today, and we're grateful to hear from them. We're grateful for the work that was done in the infrastructure package, and we're grateful for the work that the FRA selected the Big Sky Passenger Rail as one of the long-distance studies. You combine that with the Penwar money, that's $650,000. The chairman's going to go into that, and then we're teeing up another $800,000 in grants. And of course, we're working our friends Amtrak on the multiple pathway on the top line there too. So we've got two different sets of Empire Builder. We're working on two different sets of grant funding, and it is incredible. And the next phase we have with the quarter ID, and everyone comes up to us. It's like Dave knows, like Dave presents, right? They're like, so is our town getting a station? What is it going to take? And all this stuff, it's amazing, right? Just the concept, as Elaine talked about. And everyone's like, okay, so are you going to decide north and south? Yes, Elaine will decide every rail route in the country, I believe. So and then Jason Stewart's going to decide every stop. So just those folks right there, the power is right there. Now, and so a lot of folks are going to say, so what does it look like? What is coming down the tracks? What is coming down the line, right? It is this quarter ID is so critical because we're going to be identifying that, and we're going to be doing community outreach. So each and every one of you, well, some of you are here as visiting guests, but we will be working with you to identify, to get that feedback and place it in that. And you heard again from the top that that's where we're at. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to your chairman to talk through the planning, partnerships, and outreach. Mr. Chairman.
And most folks might know this already, but Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, we are a government agency here in the state of Montana. We're a subdivision of state government. And again, as Jess pointed out, have been able to accomplish a tremendous amount bootstrapping this relatively new agency here in Montana and getting us to where we are today. So what are we about? So we are not just an advocacy group. We've made that pivot. We have turn the arc here, so to speak, and we are a bona fide rail planning agency here in the state of Montana. So what have we accomplished? We have come a long way since November of 2020, which is when the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, through a joint resolution, came into existence. I've heard referenced earlier, our first annual meeting was in Lewistown, Montana, in the center of the state. Since then, I can remember a couple of years ago, we had the FRA over in Billings, Montana for the first Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit. How far have we come since then? And I'll just highlight a few items here, and we'll try to get us back on schedule a little bit, back on track, as it were. So one of the big things over the past year that we've been working on is partnering with the Montana Healthcare Foundation. We did a series of rural and tribal engagement meetings across the state looking at passenger rail as a social determinant of health. In other words, how does transportation help improve health outcomes, help improve the vitality and health of communities in a whole variety of different ways? We published a report on this. It is online. Please do check that out. Corridor ID, this is the big show in town right now, and we are grateful that the North Coast Hiawatha route, sponsored by the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, is the only new long-distance passenger rail route in the nation included in Corridor ID. We'll hear a little bit more about that from FRA coming up. And finally, was that a shout out there? Yes, okay. I love it. So, okay, just a shout out. So many accolades. Yes. Yes, and finally, I just mentioned our partnership with the Pacific Northwest Economic Region's Regional Infrastructure Accelerator. We have representatives from them in town today. We're a subrecipient of their funding stream, and thanks, Penwar, back there. And what we will be doing with those dollars, among other things, is doing a small parcel delivery for passenger rail service, small parcel delivery analysis related to passenger rail service, and we will also be doing community engagement both along the northern tier of this region, the Great Northern Corridor, and also the North Coast Hiawatha Corridor. This is a big thing. This is another big thing. We are fully supportive of a healthy and vital empire builder. I want to say that again. We are supportive of a healthy and vital empire builder. Talking about expansion of passenger rail service is not a zero-sum game. It does not mean that you add service somewhere and you subtract it somewhere else. And to reflect this, we teamed up with Amtrak this last year as co-applicants on a Fed-State Partnership grant program. We successfully garnered $15 million, and this is also in partnership with BNSF. And as we speak, planning is going on to help address what is today a real choke point up near Malta, Montana. This is emblematic of high-performance rail, of doing projects that benefit both freight and passenger rail. This is a big deal for northern Montana. It's a big deal for the entire region because what happens at this location ripples out across the entire region. Well, I probably don't need to say much more about this. Both Elaine spoke to us and also we heard from Senator Tester. We are delighted to be on the cusp of having an Amtrak board member from this Intermountain West, Rocky Mountain region, just flat out the West. So this is a big deal. And you'll probably have an opportunity throughout this conference to hear more about this, but we have a municipal partners program where we are working with communities across the region on not only helping them help us by way of creating a revenue stream to do the work of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, but also conversely helping them set the stage for planning that will accommodate and also facilitate the restoration of passenger rail service. We've done a ton of outreach. I will not go into all of that here. You can see us all over the country. There's Chase and myself from Chase from Amtrak up in Havre. Just a few weeks ago, we took a trip down to Pueblo, Colorado to do a hydrogen train demonstration there, and we've been all over the state making sure folks know that this is not just a pipe dream, but the planning is underway. And finally, we have a great social media team and are doing everything that we can to push out across the region and nation the good work here by the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, but also many of our partners who are in the room also. And I think with that, I will wrap up. And thank you so much for enduring a state of BSPRA address. And sorry, you didn't have to endure too much. But anyway, I think we will pivot now into our next segment, which is recognizing our partners who have helped us get to this point today. So with that, I'd like to introduce my good friend and also chair of the Development and Strategic Engagement Committee of the Rail Authority, Dan Bucks.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for being here. Great to see you all here. This is a wonderful group. We've come so far in so short a time. It's amazing. We're going to start with Chad, are we going to start with our partner video? Oh, it's on. Yep.
It's time to provide daily passenger rail service to all of North America. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to resume daily passenger rail service from Chicago to Seattle through southern Montana with the return of the North Coast Hiawatha. The gift of your time, talent, and treasure to the efforts of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority can help this dream become a reality. We'd like to thank the founding members of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority's Business and Association Partnership Program. Your financial investment supports alliance building and advocacy and provides critical support for this transformative initiative. We need your help. Join us in our effort to resume daily passenger rail service to southern Montana and beyond. For more information on how your company or organization can become a partner of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, email us at hello@bigskyrail.org. Thank you for your support.
Let's ride that line again. Watch our treasured beauty roll by like an old friend. All aboard Montana, like we all did way back when. All aboard Montana, time to ride that line again.
We thank Ed Meyer, our videographer, our volunteer videographer from Kalispell, Montana, for this wonderful work. Ed, thank you. Thank you very much for this great work. And we also thank Dave Simmons and his brother, J.K. Simmons. Dave wrote the song, and of course, J.K. helped him out with the singing of it. And they're Missoulians. And we thank them so much for being a part of this effort. Now, on December 8th, the President announced that 69 passenger rail routes were picked for the Corridor ID program to plan and design routes to be in a pipeline of projects ready for implementations. As you've heard, only one of those routes was a new long-distance line, the former North Coast Hiawatha. Now, excitement spread around the country about this 2,300-mile line, this huge line from Chicago to Seattle and Portland being restored again. But when the word also spread that the sponsor of this new route, was the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, a new question arose fed back to us from around the country. What is a Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority? And who are these people anyway? Now, I guess the question is understandable because most of the agencies whose routes, the other 68 routes that were selected, have existed for 50, 75, or 100 years. Well, at the time, Big Sky Rail was age 3. And of course, now we're 3.5. So while we recognize and thank our partners today, we will try to answer that question. Who are these people anyway? Well, it begins with our 19-member counties, and Jess has already introduced them and who they are. And they're the bedrock. They're the drivers of this whole effort, with the leadership of Dave Strohmaier as chair, Jason Stewart as vice chair, Mary Hensley as secretary, and Rich Wallace as treasurer, and all the other board members. We have moved forward, and we appreciate especially the participation of the tribal nations, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai, the Crow and Northern Cheyenne, and of Amtrak, represented by Chase Kitchens, and MDT, Rob Stapley, who's here, and Jim Tylick and his colleagues at BNSF, who are both here at the conference and have been from the beginning ex officio members of the board. And then we move on to the other governments who become involved. And Dave alluded to this, to our governmental partners, our cities and towns from across Montana. It began from across Montana, starting with a town of Bear Creek of 91 people on up to the biggest metropolitan areas in Montana, Billings and Bozeman and Missoula, and all these communities in between that have supported us through the Governmental Partners Program. And now we have opened this program to governmental organizations outside of Montana, counties, cities, towns, metropolitan planning areas, regional councils of governments. And our first, as Dave mentioned, our first new partner outside of Montana is Jamestown, North Dakota, and there will be many more. Now, we not only welcome and thank them for their support, but we also are working with them in return to help encourage them with information and ideas for action so that they can begin planning for the future, that they can begin to plan how they're going to maximize the benefits of passenger rail for their citizens and for their communities. We're asking, and we will be providing them with the information, with the forums and the technical assistance to help them succeed. And an example will be, for example, through train station development, transit-oriented development, and connecting services by rail or motor vehicle from the route to locations beyond the route. So it's ready when the route begins to operate again, and it's ready sometimes in some cases before the route even begins. An example of the information we'll be providing them will be putting them in touch with the ideas that Mason Baxter of iPro shared with us last night at the reception on how private rail operators can help develop and operate rail connecting services. But government cannot do this job alone. The job is too big, it's just simply too big for that. We welcome and need the help of businesses, organizations, and foundations to succeed. So we recognize and thank here our business and organization partners. We couldn't do it without them. And Dave has talked about the Montana Healthcare Foundation with the generous grant they made for the work, the pioneering work that he has already discussed. And we also thank the Northern Hotel, who is a rail director partner, a premier hotel that hosted our 2022 summit that many of you attended. And we especially thank Clearwater Credit Union. Clearwater Credit Union is an innovative financial institution in western Montana, based here in Missoula, and they were our first rail director partner and they have continued for a second year. I want to recognize Paul Herendeen and have him come forward and say a few words about why Clearwater is involved in this particular effort as a partner.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you all for having me. Dave mentioned that people come up to him and tell him stories of their recent rail experiences, and I would like to do the same. A few weeks ago, I was in New York City for a conference, and all my family lives on the East Coast, and I thought I would take advantage of that and travel around after the conference, see them. It's been a while. I was looking for ways to get around. And as it turns out, there is a direct rail line from New York City, from Manhattan, to Burlington, Vermont, where my father lives. So I was able to walk from my hotel, get on the train. It was a Friday afternoon going north, so a lot of commuter traffic. But we took off up the Hudson, beautiful New England spring. Everything's green, lush, the flowers are out, going up the river. By the time we cleared about Poughkeepsie, the train had totally emptied out. And I spent the rest of the trip holed up back in the snack car, table all to myself, spread out, drinking beer, watching the sunset over the Vermont countryside. And it was absolutely delightful. Marked contrast to the plane flight I took to get out there. And so I just want to put in a plug for the train in that respect. But the reason I was in Manhattan was a conference of community development credit unions, a group called Inclusive. We don't travel outside of the state much, but in this case, wanted to get together with all of these progressive-minded credit unions, community development credit unions, because that, at the end of the day, is what Clearwater is. We're a lot of things. We're a low-income designated credit union. We're a community development financial institution. We're a member of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. But at the end of the day, we are a local financial cooperative working on community development. We are here to help our members live their lives, raise their families, run their businesses. We're here to help our communities thrive and grow, and we're here to help protect the great state of Montana and the environment that we all love. And every one of those goals is advanced by passenger rail, all of them. And we fully support the effort to bring that back to Montana. We're also a cooperative ourselves. We were founded by 8 Missoula policemen in 1956, and coming together to solve problems is the core of what we do and where we got started. And our success since that time is entirely dependent on strong partnerships that we formed throughout the community and throughout the state. And I see a lot of familiar faces here that we've worked with on a lot of different projects. And that, to me, is really the strength of this effort and why it has made it as far as it has and why it is going to succeed. The incredible organizing, the group of people all working together on this, all pulling in the same direction is remarkable, and it's a strong effort, and I'm sure it's going to work, and we're here all the way through it to help make sure that happens. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Clearwater has absolutely been a rock of support for the authority. You'll hear this afternoon from KLJ Engineering, from Becky Rosenleaf. So she'll be visiting with you this afternoon as a part of one of our panels on revitalizing communities and creating sustainable economies. And we appreciate KLJ's Engineering's support. They became partners earlier this year before we sent in our application. It's usual at these conferences for a number of engineering firms to be sponsors and partners. And you may wonder, well, why aren't there others on here? And well, the answer is very simple. After we received the Corridor ID grant, we asked the engineering firms to step back and not sponsor us because we would be issuing a request for proposals for consultancy services. And in the interest of transparency and integrity and fairness, we ask the engineering firms to defer for now contributing to the authority so that we could proceed with that consulting process. But we recognize their important role, all of these firms and professional firms, in making these dreams become a reality. Other sponsors that we've had are Siemens, Glacier Country, Explorer Maps, and Northwestern Energy. Todd Rahr is here from Northwestern Energy. Would you like to come forward and address us?
Thanks a lot, Dan. I'm going to start with my rail experience. I didn't expect to bring this up today, but everybody else is, so I'll do mine. When I was 10 years old, I lived in Syracuse, New York, and train back there is, very much part of life. I went from Syracuse to Albany for the very first time. I think it was a Cub Scout trip. We were going to the state capitol. And, needless to say, it was a wide-eyed kid having a ride on a train. But one of my fondest memories that I still have of myself and my father, you talk about health and all of that type of stuff and what rail, does for that. It did a lot for me and my father just to connect. We weren't in a car. He wasn't paying attention to the road, anything along those lines. We just got to talk and have fun together. And so that is something that, I think is part of the big idea here, which is, it's about connecting families and things along those lines. But the other thing, I've lived numerous places in this country, all four corners of it. And back east, this is a big, way of life. Out west, it's not. And so to be able to get this going and be able to bring it to the point that it is right now is, personally, just a gratifying thing to see. And I can't wait to jump on the train to go back to wherever. And I'm from Seattle as well. I graduated from high school and community college over in that direction. Being able to jump on a train here and go to Seattle versus drive across that would be just a wonderful way to do that with my 10-year-old. So excited about that, but I represent Northwestern Energy. I'm the community relations manager here in Missoula. Really kind of standing in for our CEO, Brian Bird, who could not be here today. He is the definitely the guy who oversees the partnership with this. And, why are we a part of it? Listen, we're an energy company. There's a lot of us all over this country. And sometimes we don't get the best reputation or light spinning on us, especially when, discussion of fossil fuels and things along those lines are brought up. And, we are 58%, carbon free. We've got a ton of hydro, wind energy, things along those lines. Our commitment to sustainability is huge with Northwestern Energy. And I believe that is the case with most utilities in this country. And so to partner with, somebody who sees the same thing, because transportation is a big piece of this. And so it just makes sense that a Northwestern Energy would be a part of this as well. And we are just so happy to be here today. And, thank you for allowing us to do that. Thanks, guys.
Yes, Northwestern Energy is the largest electric utility in Montana, and we appreciate very much their partnership. Thank you, Todd, for your remarks. And then moving on, our other partners include Destination Missoula, iPro, of course, Republic Services, and Stockman Bank. They just signed up this week, 2 days ago. Hilltop Securities and Stifel Finance, and Parkside Credit Union, the Washington Companies, and of course, BNSF. And we would like to ask Emily Ralston of Destination Missoula, our local tourism organization, to come up and speak about why Destination Missoula is partnering with the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. Emily?
Thank you, Dan. And hello and welcome to Missoula for those of you who are visiting our community for the first time. Commissioner Strohmaier and the team and brought you to the most beautiful meeting space in Missoula. So please enjoy these views, and I hope you get out and enjoy the city as you're here for the next couple days. Destination Missoula and the Tourism Business Improvement District see passenger rail as such a win for our community. Of course, not only for our residents, for ourselves to be able to move around, the connectivity it brings to Missoula is amazing, and it also ties in with our goals of sustainable travel, regenerative travel, transformative travel, really giving visitors that sense of place as they come into Missoula and they travel across Montana, seeing the landscapes, and really kind of pushing that slow travel that brings dollars into our state and our community, but does so in a sustainable and thoughtful way. So we're thrilled to have you here. If there's any questions that we can answer about our community, we've got some materials out the door, and our visitor center is just a couple blocks away. So thank you. I want to say Commissioner Strohmaier's passion for passenger rail is contagious. It's amazing what he's done and the whole team has done over these past couple years, and we are so happy to be on board.
If you look out the windows, of course, you see what a tough job Emily has in terms of welcoming people to Missoula. Thank you very much, Emily. We appreciate all of our partners that we've recognized so far. We want to give a special thank you, in addition to Nonstop Local, the local media of the Coles Media Group. And we have Michelle Brackett here. Ms. Cole, that I'll ask to say some remarks here in just a minute. But we want to give a special thank you to Nonstop Local and for their effort that they have put together to provide public service announcements in the eastern part of the state about Big Sky Passenger Rail. Michelle initiated this idea. She has personally contributed to this idea. We don't know the scale of the effort yet, so we haven't put them in our partnership framework quite yet. But we wanted to say a special thank you and give Michelle Brackett a minute to also, Michelle, you're over here. Thank you very much. To come forward if you'd like and visit with us about this partnership.
Thank you, Dan. I'm Michelle Brackett from Nonstop Local and also citizen volunteer for BSPRA and help with the communications committee. How many have taken the Amtrak before? I love this room. When I was a child, we took a family trip from Philadelphia all the way across the Empire, came down the Pacific coast, Texas, and looped around, and that was the best family trip. I'll always remember it. And then I became a frequent rider on Amtrak, and I wish I could have used my Amtrak rewards to come up here from Billings. But it's been great. Thank you all for everything you guys do to bring this project alive here in Montana, and not only just in Montana, but across this region. So Coles Media, as Dan pointed out in one of our meetings, Coles Media covers from, and actually, you know, as our brand, Nonstop Local, reaches from mid-Washington, Coeur d'Alene, and almost all of Montana into northern Wyoming. The messages that we matched for one of our clients, it's a campaign where Parks Garage, who I just really appreciate his support, we matched those commercial runs, and it's a $12,000 value. They run to the end of the year, and it reaches from northern Wyoming, mid-Montana, and then all the way to east of Bozeman. So if you'd like more information on those maps, you're welcome to come say hi. I can send them to you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you again so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate this greatly. So I want to wrap this up and thank all of our members, our governmental and private partners, all of our volunteers. Just look at the great work that you have done and that all that you have accomplished. And if you are joining us here online for the first time, we welcome you and joining us either here for the first time or online. We welcome you in supporting and working with the authority. And in doing so, you will become a part of the wonderful and fantastic answer to the question of who are these people anyway?
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to all of our partners and sponsors. And Paul, I too took the Ethan Allen Express last fall. It was a great trip from New York City up to Burlington. We're going to keep rolling here. We are going to hear from the Federal Railroad Administration, Lyle Leitelt and Katie List. We're going to hear an update on both the long-distance service study, the Amtrak Daily Long-Distance Service Study, and also the Corridor Identification and Development Program. And again, we have come a long way since we all together circled up over in Billings a couple of years ago. So I will hand it over to Lyle and Katie.
Great. Thank you. Just get situated up here. Good morning. It's very exciting to be here. Is there a clicker or? Oh, perfect. Thank you. So, good morning. My name is Katie List. We are going to provide a quick overview of the long distance study as well as the Corridor ID program. I think it's important to note that this is a very condensed version of what we discussed yesterday. We're trying to fit about 6 hours of material into 30 minutes. But for those of you who like details, please don't worry. Everything we presented at the long distance study meeting yesterday will be on our study website after we finish this round of meetings, likely the week of June 17th. So, as a reminder, FRA was directed by Congress under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to conduct a long-distance service study. Congress required us to evaluate the restoration of daily passenger rail service along discontinued Amtrak long-distance routes, Amtrak long-distance routes that occur on a non-daily basis, and they also noted that FRA could evaluate potential new service. When evaluating expansion of long-distance service, Congress directed us to consider how new routes could link and serve large and small communities as part of a regional rail network, advance the economic and social well-being of rural areas, provide enhanced connectivity for the national long-distance passenger rail system, and reflect public engagement. They would also like a report at the end of the study. So Congress directed us to submit a report that includes preferred options for service restoration and enhancement, a prioritized inventory of certain capital projects, potential funding sources, estimated cost and public benefits, and recommendations for ways that Amtrak can work with local communities and organizations. So taking a step back, for those who are wondering, what exactly are long-distance routes and how are they different from the rest of the Amtrak network? So the current Amtrak network provides passenger rail service along 3 service lines. The first is the Northeast Corridor, which provides service between Boston, New York, and D.C. The second is state-supported routes, which provide service on 30 routes under 750 miles through cost-sharing agreements with state partners. And finally, long distance provides service on 15 Amtrak routes over 750 miles, and the federal government provides significant financial support for these routes. It's important to note that both state-supported and long-distance routes primarily operate on host railroad tracks, which are not owned by Amtrak. So as with any study, it's important to kind of know what it is and what it isn't. And although the study is national in scope, it's not a national rail plan. It's just focused on the long-distance network, so it's not an assessment of state-supported services. It's focused on Amtrak as a service provider with service frequencies to meet long-distance routes. We'll be looking just at existing rail corridors, not new greenfield alignments, and looking at conventional rail, not high-speed or other emerging technologies. So for folks interested in the technical side of things, the technical outputs of the study include developing market demand and estimates of operations and maintenance costs. And for the study, we're able to identify some types of passenger rail capital projects for the preferred routes. Things like some of the track upgrades, stations, maintenance facilities, and rolling stock. And these types of projects will be included as part of the prioritized inventory required by the legislation. Based on the scope and scale of this effort, and after feedback from stakeholders, we can identify the subset of capital project types, but not the full range of capital projects that may be needed for these routes, including potentially significant projects related to track capacity and grade crossing improvements. These complex and quite time-intensive projects would be determined based on future studies after the study is complete. So this is really just a visualization of everything I just said. We're able to identify some capital projects, but not others, including those that would add track capacity to accommodate existing and future rail traffic or other key safety items like grade crossing. As a result, when we complete the study, we will have estimates for a portion of total capital costs for these routes, but we will not have identified the total estimated capital costs for the preferred routes. Substantial additional planning and analysis would be required for further refinement and accuracy. So this approach and the study overall, I think it really presents some unique opportunities and challenges. In terms of opportunities, in addition to fulfilling the congressional requirements to conduct the study, here we have an opportunity to establish options for potential future long-distance service in response to legislative requirements, looking at the broad needs, challenges, and opportunities. We can also identify regions where potential new service could provide economic and social benefits, and demonstrate support for restoring service and exploring the creation of new long-distance routes. This study also satisfies an early step in the FRA project lifecycle to identify actions needed to enhance long-distance service. But there are some challenges. The study documents a high-level analysis, and a lot of additional work and resources would be required prior to implementing any of the preferred routes identified by the study. As noted earlier, the study identifies some passenger service required capital projects, but not all. Future identification of these capital projects, including those related to track capacity, would require additional time and resources, including coordination with host railroads and other stakeholders. Another challenge is that these routes would require significant unidentified funding for planning, infrastructure improvements, fleet, and ongoing operating support. So it's important to point out kind of where this study fits in the overall project lifecycle. FRA's guidance on the development and implementation of capital projects is intended to assist project sponsors in developing effective capital projects. And it defines the stages in the railroad capital project lifecycle, basically from inception on the far left to operation on the far right. It begins with identifying a railroad capital project during systems planning, followed by project planning and project development, final design and construction, to project completion and operation. The line immediately below identifies some of the FRA programs intended to support identification and completion of those project lifecycle stages. So the long-distance study is a systems planning effort that fulfills systems planning and begins project planning requirements, such as the initial identification of passenger service required capital projects, which fulfills the intent of the legislation. And although the study initiates project planning, significantly more planning is necessary to advance recommendations from the study. So to keep things on schedule, I think I might skip the next slide and go on to our engagement. So we have been working diligently to meet Congress's intent on this study. We started our regional working group meetings in January of 2023. And these meetings have played a really critical role in identifying what needs to be done to restore and expand service. We're currently working on our final round of regional working group meetings, including the Northwest meeting, which took place in this room yesterday. This is just a snapshot of where all the meetings are happening across the country over a couple of weeks. This week, we've been in New York, St. Paul, and Missoula. Next week, we'll be in Las Vegas, Dallas, and Nashville. So now we'll talk a little bit about what we've heard. So I think folks here have probably seen this map. It's the proposed network of preferred routes that we presented on earlier this year. As part of the study, the IIJA required FRA to select preferred options for restoring or enhancing service. And that's what we're showing here. The baseline network is shown in light gray. That's kind of hard to see here, but that includes existing Amtrak service. The 15 preferred routes identified with the study are shown in color and listed in the legend in the lower left. These are the preferred routes we presented to stakeholders in February of this year. And as a reminder, the proposed preferred routes are not FRA proposals for service. They're conceptual to support planning and analysis and would require substantial additional planning and analysis to determine final alignments. So we presented these preferred routes to stakeholders in February, and I think people were interested. We got a lot of feedback. FRA received over 47,000 comments in the month after we presented these maps via emails, letters, and our website. We are still processing these comments, but this map shows the cities that commenters mentioned most often by volume of comments, not necessarily where folks live. Overall, 99% of comments were supportive of long-distance passenger rail in the U.S., and many of the comments simply offered support for passenger rail without necessarily referencing a route or a city. So now we'll look at a high-level analysis of one of the preferred routes. And I realize we're going through a lot pretty quickly, but I do want to emphasize all these materials will be online likely the week of June 17th. So before we jump into a route between Seattle and Chicago that some folks here may have heard of, it's important to note the study is required to evaluate restoring daily rail service along long-distance routes that occur on a non-daily basis. As a result, this study is recommending daily service restoration for the non-daily Cardinal and Sunset Limited routes. And this restoration is assumed when identifying the proposed network of preferred routes. So, on to Seattle, Chicago. For this preferred route, here's some of the information about the conceptual high-level service schedules that were developed for analysis purposes for the study, as well as a route schematic. These conceptual schedules are not FRA proposals for service. This study selected some high-level conceptual departure times to analyze daytime service for high-volume market pairs on the preferred route. Further analysis and identification of funding after completion of the study would be necessary to advance preferred routes to project planning and project development, including detailed schedule development, although this route is also within the Corridor ID program. So the route connecting Seattle-Chicago could cover over 2,300 miles in about 50 hours. And under this conceptual service schedule, a train from Seattle could leave potentially in the early afternoon and arrive in Chicago in the late afternoon 2 days later. The train from Chicago could leave potentially in the early morning and arrive in Seattle at night about 2 days later. This preferred route could serve 34 stations, including 11 stations in small communities, adding service to 19 existing Amtrak stations. So this is a map of the Seattle-Chicago preferred route showing the results of a high-level equity and accessibility analysis done as part of the study. This preferred route could serve an additional 1.1 million people over the baseline network, including an additional 210,000 people in rural areas. It could also serve an additional 29,000 people on tribal lands, as well as additional medical centers, military installations, higher education institutions, and National Park Service lands. So, what's next? After we finish this round of regional working group meetings, FRA will be developing a final report for Congress, which will include all of the congressionally required elements for the report. And we plan to submit this report to Congress later in 2024. And moving forward, as we just noted, we'll be sending this report to Congress, but it's also worth noting that some of the long-distance preferred routes are eligible under Corridor ID, and that 3 long-distance study preferred routes are already in the Corridor ID program, including daily service on the Cardinal, daily service on the Sunset Limited, and of course, the North Coast Hiawatha. Finally, FRA is still processing additional details of the more than 47,000 comments we received as part of the long-distance study. These comments represent just a tremendous resource of stakeholder and public feedback, and FRA will be maintaining a database of these comments for reference in future planning, studies, and processes. Again, all this information will be available on our website. I know there's a lot we went through today, but I thank you for following along, and I'm going to hand it over to Lyle, who will talk a little bit about the Corridor ID program.
Thanks, Katie. So, as Katie alluded to, what are the next steps for some of the long-distance corridors? I'm going to walk through what is the Corridor ID program. Some folks in the room are aware of the program, but I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about what, how the program has been formed and what activities are going to be undertaken under that effort. And so, Corridor ID creates a foundational framework for identifying and developing new or improved intercity passenger rail services. Corridor ID aligns with FRA's goals of building the foundation for a long-term rail program, bringing world-class passenger rail service to regions across the country, and growing a safer, cleaner, and more equitable rail system. The Corridor ID program is a comprehensive intercity passenger rail planning and development program that will guide intercity passenger rail development throughout the country and create a pipeline of intercity passenger rail projects ready for implementation. Unlike previous federal intercity passenger rail planning efforts, the Corridor ID program is intended to both support a sustained long-term development effort and to set forth a capital project pipeline ready for federal and other funding. Corridor ID is the primary means for FRA to support and fund intercity passenger rail planning and development in this country. And under the program, FRA will solicit proposals for implementing new or improving existing intercity passenger rail services. We select corridors for development. Once those corridors are selected, we partner with those corridor sponsors to prepare what's called a service development plan. In the service development plan, the outputs of that includes what's called a corridor project inventory. And then those corridor projects eventually populate what is called a prioritized pipeline of projects that we are required to submit to Congress every year. And then those projects in the corridor ID program are also eligible for funding under FRA's financial assistance programs. Again, as I mentioned in the last slide, corridor ID is the primary means for guiding financial support and technical assistance towards efforts establishing new intercity passenger rail corridors or improving existing services. It also provides that sustained support of selected corridors through project planning and project development stages, following off the slide that Katie presented on that life cycle stages. In this program, again, FRA partners with the corridor sponsors to prepare those service development plans and conduct preliminary engineering and environmental reviews to enhance those capital projects and ready them for final design. And then again, those projects would be fully developed through the CID program, will benefit during the selection of future funding programs. So this is a timeline, and there's two slides here, but this is a timeline of the corridor ID program and what has been undertaken to date. And so the enactment of the bipartisan infrastructure law occurred in November of 2021. In that included the provisions about the corridor ID program, and we were required to establish the programs within 180 days of enactment. And so we did that on May 13th, 2022 in the Federal Register. And then in December of 2022, we published our first notice of corridor solicitation and funding opportunity for the corridor ID program. And then in May of 2023, we were required to submit our first congressional report of the program. And because we did not have any projects selected at that point, it was a very short report. And then in December, we made our selections, and I think most of you are aware in this room, right? North Coast Hiawatha was selected for the restoration of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority was selected for the restoration of North Coast Hiawatha service. And then in February and every subsequent year, we are required to submit a report to Congress every year about the project pipeline as part of the program. And then right now, we are currently working with all of our selected corridors to move them in what's called step 1 of the program, and I'll walk through that in a little bit. But out of the 69 selections, a majority of our corridors have already been obligated for step 1, so they have their grants in hand, and we are currently working on developing their service development plan, scope, schedule, and budget with them. So as I mentioned, there were 69 selections across the country, across 44 states. The first selections, the first grant money that folks receive is a step 1 grant. And again, I'll walk through it in a little more details, and everybody received at least, or at maximum, up to $500,000 to support scope of work activities. And so that totaled $34.5 million. And so in this map, I know it's a little hard to see, but there's also a QR code, and you can go online and read up on each corridor in more detail if you have more interest. We have the 69 selections shown in dark blue is all of the existing conventional rail services that operate today. So a lot of the existing corridors were selected in the program. The dashed blue line is new conventional rail corridors that were also selected. And then the dashed red are new high-speed rail corridors that were also selected. And so as you can see, North Coast Hiawatha service obviously is one of our, as folks noted, is the only new long-distance corridor in the program. But we also noted there's 2 other long-distance services, the Daily Cardinal and Daily Sunset Limited as well. So I won't go into this in more detail because Katie talked a little bit about this in the long-distance side of the presentation. But again, this is our project life cycle stages. And so as we noted, the long-distance study is really a systems planning effort and fulfills that objective. And so where the corridor ID program fits into the project life cycle stages is really developing project planning and project development activities. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that entails in a little bit. But again, this is at the onset of corridor development. It is part of our development stages. And once sponsor completes those development stages, they would then move into what's called implementation stages, like final design, construction, and eventually operation. So this is a lot to take in, and I usually have clicks to walk through folks on this, but I'll try to do that as easy as I can in just my descriptions here. And so Quarter ID is set up into 3 steps of the program. And so step 1 is developing a scope, schedule, and budget for a service development plan. And so that $500,000 that the authority received and all our other sponsors received is intended to help develop what they would need to do in a service development plan. So it's really establishing that initial framework and understanding about what technical work needs to be done in their service development plan. And so in that process, we work, FRA and the project sponsor will work on developing those materials. And then one of those items is a budget, right? We want to understand how much money and time and schedule is necessary to move those corridors forward in a service development phase. So that budget that we identify in step 1 of the program is then the budget that we would use into step 2 of the program, which is actually doing a service development plan. And so the first step is a no match commitment. Step 2 is a 10% match commitment and non-federal match, I should say. And in that process, we work with the sponsors to develop a service development plan. And so at the end of the service development plan, there is a capital project inventory as part of a phase implementation plan. And capital projects identified in that may advance into the next phase based on FRA's discretion and available funding and readiness of those projects. And then those projects would then be advanced into step 3 of the program, which is doing preliminary engineering and environmental review. And at that point, the non-federal match increase goes up to 20%. So, and in that phase, in coordination with FRA, the sponsor completes preliminary engineering for capital projects and also environmental review. And then those capital projects, once they've completed their environmental review and engineering components, can be advanced into the project pipeline that we submit to Congress every year, and then have prioritized funding for our other funding programs, including the Fed State program. And so what is the type of activities that a sponsor is going to complete under the Quarter ID program? So we talked about the life cycle stages, right? This is what the development of a project looks like. But what are the actual activities in here? And so under step 2, which is again developing that service development plan, completing substantial project planning, activities that are typically undertaken are developing a purpose and need for the corridor, developing technical project planning activities. So that's things like operations analysis, operations and maintenance costing, capital cost estimations, fleet planning, all those things that you would need to identify to understand how a train would operate. We also would look at a consideration of alternatives in that effort. So what are the various ways the service could serve? What is the purpose of the project? And then also stakeholder engagement. So starting to communicate with both the public, agencies, and host railroads in the development of those plans. And so once those are activities undertaken under step 2, and then step 3 of the program is NEPA, the federal environmental review process, preliminary engineering activities, detailed cost estimation, budget and scheduling, project management and financial planning, procurement strategies, and advancing those stakeholder engagement pieces into stakeholder agreements. So those are the type of activities that you would see under the Corridor ID program as sponsors move along. And so FRA is working on developing more of the program. Again, this is a new program for us and establishing kind of what are the expectations of program policies. So we do have a website for the program. If you just Google Corridor ID program FRA, it's easy to find, but the link up there is the actual link there, railroads.dot.gov/Corridor ID program. And on that webpage, we have some materials to support our sponsors about what it means to take on a service development plan. And so one of the big technical pieces we have on there, which most of our sponsors are aware of, is we have a scope of work framework for a service development plan. And so the graphic on the right there is just a screenshot of here is a scope of work template that FRA is encouraging sponsors to use as they develop their service development plan. And so it includes all the activities that you would see under a service development plan and also meet the statutory requirements of the program. And then again, we also have webinars on our website. If you want to hear myself in a recording and a couple of my colleagues talk about the program more, you can do that as well. And so we have more information, and I will say over the summer, we will be also providing more technical support information to the industry about the Corridor ID program. And so with that, I'll wrap us up. But again, there is more details on the FRA website. The email address there is for our long distance study. So if you have questions related to the long distance study, you can email contact us at fralongdistancestudy.org. I also encourage everyone, as Katie noted, we will publish the meeting round materials probably June 17th or so. And so that information will be found on that website, fralongdistancestudy.org. And so, yeah, we thank you very much for your time and appreciate giving us the opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you.
All right, we do have time for questions if you'd be willing to just take a few moments for Q&A. So thank you, Jess. If you could run the mic and I'll let you guys... Okay. Anyone in the room here have any questions for our guests from the FRA? Yep, we got a question in the back, then up front here.
Yeah, I'm just curious from either one of you, when we talk about the process, how does it prioritize new versus existing routes? I mean, how does that, whether it's Corridor ID or the other program, how are those weighed against each other, or are they weighed against each other? Do they stand on their own merits?
For Corridor ID, it is I would say, a non-competitive process. We are working with sponsors to develop their own individual inventories and looking for them to, in that process, we're asking to develop what is called a phase implementation plan. So a lot of these corridors are not going to be developed from zero to nothing, right? There's going to be an opportunity to grow the service and start with maybe a subset of projects. And so it's not, at this phase, it's not non-competitive, but we do have to develop a prioritized inventory to Congress, and that is still a policy piece that at the FRA we're still working on.
Yeah, for many years I've advocated the restoration of North Coast Hiawatha should be a train that splits in Spokane like the Empire Builder does and recombines, so you have a full train going to both Portland and Seattle. It provides far, far better service. It has lower capital costs, substantially lower. It has lower operating cost than a separate train that just runs like the old North Coast Hiawatha. My question is, why wasn't that evaluated?
So as part of the study, we looked at various service options and types in discussions with primarily Amtrak. As part of the effort, we weren't looking at split service. There's challenges with doing that and doing meets as well. But that does not preclude, again, in next phases of project planning, like through the North Coast Hiawatha Corridor ID effort, to look at those opportunities. So it could be an option. Again, what we did in the long distance study was lay that initial framework and vision. But as we alluded to in a lot of the reports, it is what we're putting out is not a proposal of service. And so substantial more planning and work with our stakeholders would be necessary in the next phase.
I'm a local economic development person. The zero is really a number that's easy, zero non-federal match. But as you get into the 10% and the 20%, harder. Have you seen anything across the country that could give us some insight of how, like a Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority would find the 10% and then 20% matching funds?
I would suggest that if folks are interested, and I think I've talked to Dave about this before, is that there are opportunities to talk to other corridor sponsors to see how they are pursuing some of those items. Again, a lot of the services that we've identified under Corridor ID, the sponsors are mostly state DOTs. That's not all, but we do have other localities. There are a couple other rail passenger authorities. And so they are also, again, seeking how to meet those match funds. Again, every state is different in how they can utilize their funds and whatnot, and so there's not, I think, a one-size solution for everybody, but I would encourage, and what we usually do is encourage everyone to talk with their stakeholders in their corridors and see, what opportunities that people can work on together to meet those elements.
Other questions from anyone in the room? We got one here and then one in the back.
Next round of quarter ID, fiscal year 25 is what our plan is, that there'll be another solicitation for the quarter ID program.
I have a question about scheduling, and I'm not totally clear how that falls under your purview, but reading as an outsider more about the success of overnight and sleeper service in the EU as a way to be more competitive with air travel. I'm curious, how the long-distance corridor studies interface with that kind of success that's been seen in other places. I know there's constraints about rolling stock and intermediate stops and that kind of thing, but I'd love to hear your take, just given the tentative timetables and that sort of thing that are shown on this.
Sure. Are you talking about, just to clarify, connections to other services, or?
It's about how sleeper service could be seen as a competitive advantage for long-distance trains because it makes them a lot nicer as a passenger.
Sure. Well, I think you can definitely talk to Amtrak about that because they have the experience of offering and managing that service. I can tell you that on current long-distance routes, about 80% of passengers actually ride in coach, and about a little over 15% ride in sleepers. So it is, the majority are in coach and taking shorter trips, about 450 miles. The folks in sleepers do tend to travel longer, probably close to 1,000 miles. And when doing this study, we assumed that there would be both sleeper and coach cars available, similar to the existing Amtrak services, so that both different ticket types would be offered. So this is, in that part of the study, we're assuming that Amtrak continues to offer sleeper and coach on their long-distance routes. Thank you.
And I think we've got a question here, and then we'll come back to the middle of the room.
I watched a recent presentation on PBS featuring our brand leader, Dave Strohmaier. And Dave, you suggested in the interview in discussing financing the relevance of other forms of transportation and how those are financed by whatever way they're financed. How much work have you done to build an analog of this versus the subsidies which are granted the airline industry and or the highway industry and gasoline-driven cars, et cetera? Is there, because I can see that as being a pertinent or at least a relevant way of generating an estimate of what might be, askable of the federal government for that sort of thing.
Sure. So as a little bit of background, the federal government does provide substantial subsidies currently for Amtrak long-distance services. We typically provide funding to help offset the operating loss for these 15 long-distance routes. So there is an existing annual appropriation from Congress to support these routes. And one of the requirements of the study was for us to look at some potential funding sources. So we will, be going through and identifying existing sources and potential grant programs. I don't believe we're getting deeply into other modes and their funding, but thank you. That's always a helpful suggestion to look at how.
Ed, is what you're asking the comparison between public investment and other modes of transportation versus passenger rail to draw out the comparison that there is virtually no form of transportation that moves people that is not publicly subsidized in some way.
And also another angle might be a valuation of
a carbon saving thing, because we all know rail transportation has much less, greenhouse impact than any other form of transportation.
Yes, and in our final report, which after we submit to Congress, we publish on both the study website and FRA's website, I think we'll go a little deeper into some of the benefits of rail, whether it be equity and access, potential safety impacts by, moving folks from single occupancy vehicles to train, as well as, potential travel time savings based on the current rail network.
There's one other thing I haven't seen mentioned, but it's real, is this strategic value of rail as an alternative to other forms of transportation in the event of, particularly warfare, God forbid, but that's a very real thing in most of the world. If your bridge goes out, on the highway, then you've got a train. That's a strategic analysis.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're looking at is, the option value of having a different mode available to you. Instead of just having a vehicle or potentially an intercity bus, you would have a new mode available, and to have that option in case the other two are not available.
Thanks for that. And I think we've got behind the camera question there, and then gentleman to the right.
So my question is on the step timeline process. So say...
And could you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, yes. I'm Zach Fulheim. I'm local news. So say the 10% of non-federal funding for the budget is matched. On your end, what is the timeline moving between steps then to try to get it into the pipeline to step 3 and then over the finish line?
That's a good question. So under step 1 of the program, again, we would work with the sponsor to develop what is the detailed kind of schedule, scope, and budget of a service development planning effort. Once the entity has essentially the match available, we're able to, for step 2, we're able to obligate and go through that kind of grant administrative process fairly quickly. There's obviously some administrative steps there, but going from step 1 to step 2 is a non-competitive process and fairly straightforward. And then once we finish the service development plan, which again is based off of the schedule that we've developed with the sponsor, and we identify that capital inventory of projects, the funding and the readiness of the sponsor and the program would be evaluated to determine when those projects should move forward. So for right now, I can say between step 1 and step 2, the process should be as seamless as possible, as much as that can be from a federal administrative standpoint. And then step 2 to step 3, there would be a little bit more evaluation into assessing when projects are ready.
And just real quick to clarify, does that have to go through the congressional report every time between these steps?
So, good question. So what we report out to Congress is both the project inventory from the SDP, from the service planning process, and then the pipeline is kind of you have finished the program, right? These are projects that are ready for federal investment for final design and construction. And then those projects on the pipeline get the prioritization in our Fed State program and potentially other federal programs. But at the onset, what we want to build is that corridor inventory with all of our sponsors, and actually then develop and see folks get through that finish line for that project pipeline inventory that we can also show to Congress that these projects are ready to go. Thank you.
And just to bring it home here locally, we currently, as the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, have an open procurement. So we're in the process of seeking professional consulting assistance to help us with the planning process through Corridor ID. Our goal is that by the end of July, we will have a consulting team under contract. And if we can move as expeditiously as possible, hopefully even maybe perhaps by the end of this year, have moved through step 1 and are looking at step 2. So that is the goal. Yes, sir.
All right. My name is Steve Valdez. I'm from Kalispell, Montana. I have written the Empire Builder. I'm so glad to see FRA representing the nation here. I hope to bring to light I don't know how big of an impact passenger rail is going to have in western Montana, all throughout Montana. I think the southern route, it touches some of the cities of Montana, but I think that possibly the federal government needs to look at the whole of Montana to get a better perspective on what the future of passenger rail services could be. At one point in time, we were basically the bee's knees. Everything was all about rail at one point in time in America. And I think if we just do it right, one step at a time, try to get some of these old routes back, like the North Coast Hiawatha, hopefully sooner than later. I know Utah, Idaho, they didn't get on the, the same track as as Big Sky. And what is your take as far as like Utah and Idaho being able to connect to like Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, as far as that and getting some of their rail services back? I know that's kind of an off topic, but how do you feel about that?
I won't describe how I feel. What I'll describe is potentially opportunities, right? So in the long distance study, again, we identified 15 long distance routes. Several folks noted, right, one is essentially what would be the restoration of what was the former Pioneer service, right? So that would go from Denver to Seattle. We also identified a route between Billings, Montana, and El Paso. And so, again, there are several routes across the West that we identified in a long-distance study. In terms of opportunities, as Elaine's question was, when is the next quarter ID opportunity? Next fiscal year, we hope to have a notice out, and those would be opportunities for project sponsors in either the states of Idaho, Utah, or anywhere else across the country to also submit other corridors to the program, and then we could advance those similarly like we're going to do with the Big Sky Passenger Rail program.
All right, we are coming down to the 4-minute mark, and I see a question in the back there. And I should remind folks, if this is delightful to see standing room only. If during the break you actually want a chair, there are more chairs and seats scattered around here, so please make yourself comfortable. So, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just curious, how are fares going to be made affordable for lower middle income type folks? We know one of our big challenges in Montana is that we've got a lot of billionaires, multimillionaires, private equity, venture capital. All of these folks are super excited about this because it's going to allow them to go from Bozeman to Missoula and back seamlessly. But what about that person who's making $20,000 a year? Thank you.
Sure. So in terms of the folks who are typically riding long-distance services, I think we're very aware of the fact that over 80% are not riding in sleeper, they're riding in coach, and their trips are averaging around 450 miles. And while this study isn't touching on fares, equity is a big component of it. So I think that it's important for us to keep in mind going forward to have a kind of continued appreciation for who is riding these routes, their income levels and other demographic information, and making sure that there are policies developed to help meet those needs. FRA does not control Amtrak fares. Amtrak is a business, and they manage those on their own. However, I think we can definitely talk in the report to Congress about the folks who are currently riding the long-distance trains and any particular economic or demographic issues that may be impacting them.
Thanks. And as luck would have it, we have one Amtrak board member and a nominee in the room, so message delivered. And Kirk, it looks like you're going to have the final word before we break.
Yeah, since you brought up the subject of the subsidy for long distance, Amtrak has testified to Congress that if they drop all the long distance trains, they will need an additional subsidy of about $300 million a year. So how do you explain that long distance loses money?
I think
way to have a small question for the last minute.
Very, very small. So while I don't have that particular analysis in front of me, what I can tell you is that under the bipartisan infrastructure law, There is a requirement in U.S. code that says that Amtrak cannot discontinue any of the existing long-distance routes in any year in which it receives the appropriate federal subsidy. So this is obviously something that has been thought about in Congress.
All right, more conversation to be had. So thanks, everyone. We are back on track time-wise. We're going to take a 15-minute break. If the coffee is empty, it is not empty. We are back in business, so plenty of Java for all of you. Make yourself comfortable. Check out the great scenery on the south side of the building here, and we'll see you back for another great discussion in about 15 minutes.